Sarah had always been fascinated by old houses. As a real estate agent specializing in historic properties, she was drawn to the charm, history, and mystery behind places that had witnessed generations come and go. When the McAllister Manor came on the market, she was more than excited. The grand Victorian mansion, built in the late 1800s, had been left abandoned for nearly 30 years, and rumors of hauntings and tragedies hung over it like a fog. Most agents would have stayed away, but Sarah never put much stock in ghost stories. McAllister Manor was situated atop a secluded hill, surrounded by gnarled trees with branches that seemed to clutch at the sky. A crooked wrought iron gate marked the entrance to the overgrown driveway, which crunched under Sarah's tires as she drove up. She felt a chill in the air, though it was a warm autumn day. Shaking it off, she parked the car, grabbed her flashlight, and approached the looming front door. Inside, the house was a time capsule of decay. The air was heavy with dust, and a stale, musty odor clung to every corner. Cobwebs hung like shrouds from the high ceilings, and the faded wallpaper peeled in long strips. Sarah found it captivating. She imagined what it must have looked like in its heyday, filled with elegant guests, laughter, and life. She set to work exploring each room, documenting potential repairs with her camera. The ground floor offered the usual finds: an expansive parlor with a grand piano missing half its keys, a library filled with decaying books, and a dining room where a tarnished chandelier hung crookedly over a long-abandoned table. Nothing felt particularly unusual for an old house, but there was an unshakable feeling of being watched. As she climbed the staircase to the second floor, a curious sight caught her attention. At the end of a narrow, dim hallway, a faded tapestry of a pastoral scene swayed slightly, revealing the outline of a door behind it. Sarah's brow furrowed. The door wasn't on the blueprint she had studied. She approached and pulled the tapestry aside. The door was small, with a plain wooden frame, out of place in the otherwise ornate house. Intrigued, she tried the handle, but it was locked. Determined not to leave any part of the house unexplored, Sarah retrieved her lock-picking kit from her bag and worked the rusty lock until it clicked open. She hesitated, taking a deep breath before pushing the door ajar. A blast of cold air met her as she stepped inside, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The room was tiny and windowless, its walls constructed of cold, gray stone rather than wood or plaster. The only object inside was a solitary wooden rocking chair, placed in the center of the room. A thin layer of dust coated the floor, and as Sarah swept her flashlight across the walls, she noticed something unsettling: tiny scratch marks, hundreds of them, etched into the stone, as if made by small fingernails. Her unease deepened. The air grew colder still, and she realized that the rocking chair, though motionless when she first entered, was now gently swaying back and forth. There was no breeze, no draft, the air was dead still. She felt a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, as if unseen eyes were boring into her. She was about to leave when a faint sound reached her ears, a rhythmic creaking that seemed to come from the walls themselves. It was distant, like a whisper carried on the wind, but as she listened, it grew louder, resolving into the sound of a child softly crying. Sarah's pulse quickened. She stepped back toward the door, but it suddenly slammed shut with a deafening bang, sealing her inside. Sarah spun around, her flashlight shaking in her hand. She pounded on the door, shouting for help, but the walls seemed to swallow her cries. Her breath misted in the freezing air, and the flashlight flickered, plunging her into darkness. The sound of crying gave way to soft, eerie laughter. The voice was that of a little girl, but there was something off about it, something too knowing for a child. Then she saw it. Her flashlight sputtered back to life just in time to catch the faint outline of a small figure standing in the corner. It was a girl, no older than 7, with a pale face, dressed in a nightgown so old it seemed to be rotting away. Her eyes were hollow, empty sockets that seemed to stare straight into Sarah's soul. "Play with me," the girl whispered, her voice echoing throughout the tiny room. Forever, Sarah backed away, her heart pounding in her chest. The girl stepped closer, but it was as if she was gliding over the ground, her feet never touching the floor. The rocking chair began to move more violently, slamming against the floor as if in a fit of rage. The sound grew deafening, echoing off the stone walls, drowning out Sarah's own frantic breaths. She reached for the door again, twisting the handle desperately, but it remained locked. Then, without warning, everything stopped. The chair ceased its thrashing, and the room fell into a silence so complete it seemed unnatural. Sarah turned to face the girl, but she was gone. In her place was an old, yellowed piece of paper lying on the floor. Sarah knelt down to pick it up, and as she unfolded it, a chill shot down her spine. It was a list of names, each name followed by a date. The last entry read Margaret Thompson, 1903, written in a child's scrawl. Below the names, scrawled in frantic handwriting, was a single phrase, "Don't forget us." Suddenly, Sarah felt a sharp pain in her head, like a needle piercing her skull. Visions flooded her mind, flashes of children, locked in the room, their tiny hands scratching at the walls. Their cries echoed in her ears, and she could feel their desperation, their hopelessness. The pain grew until it was unbearable, and she collapsed to the floor, clutching her head. When she opened her eyes, she found herself lying on the cold stone floor of the forgotten room. The rocking chair was now right beside her, and a chill ran through her as she saw what was carved into the wood, "Next." With a surge of adrenaline, she hurled herself at the door, pounding on it until her knuckles bled. Then, just as suddenly as before, the door flew open, and Sarah stumbled into the hallway. She gasped for air and looked back, but the door was gone. The tapestry hung in its place, fluttering gently as if mocking her. Shaking, she raced down the stairs and out of the house, never stopping to catch her breath. She fled to her car, hands trembling as she fumbled with the keys. As the engine roared to life, she sped away from McAllister Manor, leaving the cursed house behind. In the days that followed, Sarah tried to move on, but something had changed. She felt a constant presence, a chill that followed her everywhere. She began seeing glimpses of the little girl in mirrors, and reflections, always just out of reach. And at night, she would wake to the sound of a rocking chair creaking, as if it was right beside her bed. She did some research and discovered a dark history. In 1903, a scandal had rocked the McAllister family. Children from the nearby orphanage had gone missing, and rumors circulated that they had been hidden away in the manor, never to be seen again. The forgotten room, it seemed, had been a place of punishment, or worse, for the unfortunate children. Now, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the room was not finished with her. She feared falling asleep, dreading what she might find when she woke. It was as if the children's spirits had latched onto her, desperate to be remembered. The worst part was the growing sense that each night she got a little closer to waking up back inside that cold, dark room. And then, one night, she did. She awoke to find herself lying on the dusty floor, the rocking chair slowly swaying beside her. The door was locked, and the air was icy. As Sarah's eyes adjusted to the darkness, she saw them, the ghostly children gathered around her, their hollow eyes watching her intently. The little girl from before stepped forward, smiling a cold, empty smile. "Now it's your turn," she whispered, as the door slowly disappeared into the wall. "Don't forget us." And as the darkness closed in, Sarah understood with a sinking dread that she never would leave that room. The forgotten had claimed her at last.